Lincoln High School.
Who's that man I see underneath the hanging tree? He looks just like me. So tell me, am I really free? Could have been my mother crying for my brother. And everybody's praying for peace. But who's gonna protect us from the poets? Keep these chains on me. 'Cause I don't wanna be another seat underneath the hanging tree. Pray for me. Don't let me be another seat underneath the hanging tree. Rains on our bodies, color of purple fruit. Power the power. Spent on the something about you. Am I just living? 'Cause the way they do my cut, I just wanna cry. I don't wanna be another seat underneath the hanging tree. Wait for me. Don't let me be another seat underneath the hanging tree.
Welcome, everyone, to DSM's Black Art Matters series. We're here today with Iris Wyatt, who is a Dallas native, went to Skyline High School, and is now an educator at DISD's Lincoln High School, and going on being an educator in Dallas ISD for almost 20 years now. Welcome, Iris.
Thank you.
So how are you doing today, just to kind of clear the air first?
I'm great.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right in.
Okay.
So the series is called Black Art Matters, and I would love to start the conversation just asking you, what does Black identity mean for you?
That's a good question. I think it means exclusion. In a lot of cases, African Americans they have to create their own brand because they're excluded a lot of times from mainstream. Thus the word Black art. Why isn't it just art?
Yeah.
But because we're excluded, thus Black art.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's so different than what we've gotten previously. And I would love to dive into that just a little bit more of when did that kind of definition of Black identity come to shape for you? And what was the evolution of coming to that?
To put it on the table,
Yeah.
when I attended Skyline High School back in the 80s, we had a drill team of about 70 young ladies. And only 11 of us were African American. And normally the officer line, we had 5 officers. We would only have one African American officer. So there was always a separation of it all instead of it being unified. I found myself a lot of times being excluded at Skyline because of how dark my skin tone was. And I decided that I would not attend a PWI, that I would go to a historically Black institution of where I really found my power as a Black person, because I often felt like my skin color was not enough. So I think that's where the separation mentally occurred in my mind, that I was not necessarily good enough as a dancer to be the captain of a predominantly white team when I knew I was, but I wasn't enough.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about how that exclusion feeling that you had at Skyline impacted the type of creative work you wanted to do as an artist? And then when you went to college and found that idea of that Black power, was there a shift in the type of art you wanted to create as a dancer or put out into the world?
No, it wasn't necessarily a shift. And it was I have to make sure that the children behind me don't mentally go through what I went through, to understand or to empower them, to train them to be able to compete.
Wow.
So that they're, mentally strong enough that they don't have to think that they have to be excluded or that they're not enough.
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you for sharing that. So I imagine that then kind of propelled you into this world of education that you find yourself into
Absolutely.
now. Can you talk to us a little bit about that journey of entering into the education space and the motivation behind it?
Well, when I graduated from Grambling, I moved back to Dallas, and I got into the alternative certification program, of which I began my career at J.L. Long. J.L. Long Middle School was an awesome school, had awesome support, awesome parents. I can remember standing in my classroom and a parent coming in and saying, "What do you wish for?" And voila, everything that you needed was there. Well, but I felt lonely there because, again, I was at a predominantly Caucasian, Hispanic institution, and I was not serving my African American community, of which I said that I was going to do. So I made the choice 2 years later to move to Lincoln High School. And I remember standing in the door of my classroom at Lincoln High School, almost about to cry, because I did not have the resources that I need to serve my children. And a gentleman by the name of Billy Jack Harvell, who happens to be a Caucasian gentleman, walked up to me. He was the assistant principal, and he noticed it. And he said, "What's going on?" I was like, "I don't even have a printer to print my work for my students." And he said, "Wait a second." He came back a few minutes later with the key to his office, and he said, "Come with me." He said, "This is the key to my office, and anything in here you can have." And he let me know that there are always people there to support you. You have to open your mouth and gain the support, which leads me to Rachel. 20 years later, of course, my children dance on concrete floors. We dance in a normal classroom. We have makeshift mirrors. We have, things that we just don't need, things that we just put together.
Yeah.
And Rachel came in and she was like, "No way. There's no way you can create what you create with the circumstances that you have here." But of course, over the journey, we used to practice outside. So I felt like it was a blessing to be in a classroom on concrete floors. But she was like, "No, other programs in Dallas have way more than you have. Our room is the normal size of a small classroom. I have 25 girls, but we make it work." But she says, "No, it's gonna be equal," and I'm excited that it's gonna be equal.
So for those of you who are watching this episode today, you mentioned Rachel. Rachel Hara is the director of theater and dance for Dallas ISD. And I definitely want to touch on her a little bit more as we continue this conversation in regards to a support system. But going back just a little bit to that transition from jail long into Lincoln, that was a brave decision that you decided to make in order to really serve those students that you really wanted to serve. What type of toll mentally and emotionally did that decision have on you or weigh on you, or did you find it was an easier decision to make that move?
Well, it was easy because I love my students, but it was very difficult because of Lincoln. We lack a lot of support, the supplies. If we don't do our own individual fundraisers, our children go without.
Yeah.
For instance, a lot of my students are raised by single parents or grandmothers that are on fixed incomes. So I remember we were at a game one time and my girls were sitting in the stands and they all had on different jackets, like a brown jacket, a yellow jacket, whatever they could afford, because it was cold.
Right.
And we were in the playoffs because Lincoln is a very good, have very good athletic program. So we were in the playoffs, and I look across the field, and you see this big, huge drill team, and they all have Lettermans on. They all have blankets. They come out on the field. The fathers come out with all these with the props, and we don't have any of that.
Yeah.
So we have to make it work and still compete and get the same type of standing ovation that they get with all the support with no support.
Right.
So we sell candy, we wash cars, we do whatever it takes to build the program. Right. So over the course of the years, I built a costume room where no longer do the children have to worry about, do I have $1,500 to join the team? Because, I can't, I have a girl sitting in the audience who can really dance, but she can't dance because she can't pay for it.
Right.
So we built a costume room over the years. We built a costume room where now my if you can dance, come on. I got a costume in a costume closet with you. But now with COVID, I'm really worried.
Yeah.
Because they can't share costumes anymore.
I find it just inspirational, the work you've been able to do to enhance your program at Lincoln. I wonder, have you seen further inequities with you being a Black educator? What is that dichotomy like? But with your white counterparts, whether it be in the district or outside the district, do you feel you have to work twice, 3 times as hard as a Black educator on behalf of your students, but also on behalf of yourself?
Absolutely. We are at a deficit with a lot of things. Being an instructional coach, I get to visit other campuses. So things that we deal with at Lincoln, other schools don't deal with, like some discipline issues that we may have, timing issues, students showing up late a lot. Just the parental support a lot of times is not there. But we're fighters at our school. We have a great leader. Principal Weaver is excellent at her job at motivating our children to fight for themselves. So we're at a disadvantage. Supplies and support. Like I told you at J. Long, the parent come in and say, "What do you need?"
Right.
So we don't have parents that walk in and say, "What do you need?" and it shows up the next week. So we really rely heavily on the support that the district offers.
Right.
And of course they try to divvy it up equally, but it doesn't always manage to work out.
Yeah. So you just mentioned that. So you are an instructional coach for the district, but also the dance coach at Lincoln, which actually doesn't technically have a program. You were telling me before.
No, we don't have dance class.
Yeah, you'd have. So it's all after school.
Everything we do is after school.
Can you just expand on that a little bit? Because it blows my mind that you have built this incredible program at Lincoln High School, but there is technically no formal program or dance classes there. What is that? what is that like for you when you go into work, knowing you have these two completely different jobs
They are
that
very
require
different.
the same amount of work and effort going into them?
They are very different because with the state of Texas and the high stakes tests, we have to make sure that our educators are sound in their skill. So I have to make sure that the English teachers, that department, is working very diligently to make sure our students are taught well. So I have to focus in on that. So from 9 until 4:15, that's my job.
Right.
So I cannot even focus at the least on dance. So which brings me into I have to pull in parents.
Right.
I have a strong parent base who believe in what I offer their children because I do everything that I can to expose them to the other side.
Right.
For instance, I didn't share the video, but Lincoln went to a competition, I think legacy competition, and I think Denton or something like that. We were probably we were the only Black school at that competition. So my kids were able to see other kids. And they were like, wow, I love what they do. And I use that as an opportunity to say, well, okay, let me teach you.
Right.
What they're doing so that you don't feel inferior. You walk in with your head held high and you go in there and you dominate. So that's how I talk to them and how I share with them. And the piece that I just shared with you, to be very clear, that was the very first time that Lincoln was ever invited, and this was Dallas ISD. It was the first time that we were ever invited to that opportunity to be adjudicated. The other schools have always been invited, but Lincoln, we've never. And we've never been invited because they didn't know anything about us. They assumed and they put us in a box that we were just a football, basketball, shake your booty team. They never came. I used to send out the invites to our spring shows. No one ever showed up to even see what we could actually do. But of course, I met Rachel this year, and Rachel saw that we were a full-fledged program without a program. And she was like, I'm going to do better. And she invited us, and people saw us. Of course, you saw they were like excited about the piece.
Yeah.
And the piece, just dropped a parent. I said I had a good parent group. A parent sent me the song, and I prayed about it. And I was like, this is a song that I must do. Where I came from, Grambling State University, Diane Maroney Grigsby, she's the director at Grambling State, and she's from Alvin Ailey. And she taught us, or she instilled in us, you can put on rags and break the house down.
Yeah.
So I chose not to go and purchase a full-fledged costume. I put them in black and rags. So we bought a shirt and we cut it up in rags and we put a noose around their neck and we took it off and we gave it back to society because you're not going to keep me bound. So when those girls walked in there, they were a little nervous, but I told them, you have this. You got this. You go on this stage and you own it.
Yeah.
And they did it.
And the piece you shared is so beautiful and so moving, and clearly you are not afraid to bring social justice topics into your classroom.
No.
How do you approach that with your students? One, knowing they're coming from their perspective, but also the perspective that you bring as an artist and as an individual.
Well, I approach it through love because through everything that we all go through, the only way to accomplish or the only way to get past everything is through love. And I'm going to share a situation with you. Rachel invited me to sit on a board to select a dance company to do the camp for all drill teams in Dallas. Well, half of the drill teams in Dallas have what we call an HBCU style. And a lot of times, those schools do not attend Caucasian camps because it's pretty much a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because we go to the camps, we learn that style, and that's not the style that we actually do. And of course, we want to prepare our children to go to whatever school they want to go to. So, if we have students that's interested in going to a Black institution, why go to a Caucasian camp when they're going this way?
Right.
So Rachel understood that, which is a great thing. So she brought in a lot of companies that do camps. And the one thing she requested of them is that they include the HBCU style for camp, because we have all of our schools are going
Right.
to attend. One company pulled out to be interviewed. They said they didn't care. They were not going to do it.
Wow.
Rachel was livid.
I can imagine. Knowing Rachel, I can imagine.
She was livid. And we were all sitting there, and I told her, I said, don't be upset. She doesn't know. When a person doesn't know, you can't hate them.
Mm-hmm.
When a person doesn't understand, you can't get angry with them. I said, what we have to do is we have to prepare a HBCU style team to go to her competition and win it. Then she'll know. So you can't be upset. You can't be angry. You just have to train your children to go and show up.
Yeah.
And they'll be okay.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's so enlightening, but also the leadership you demonstrated in that situation is incredible. Speaking of Rachel and also the district, from your very start at Lincoln, it's been clear that the resources you needed weren't always there. The support you needed was not always there.
True.
Can you talk about the shift that you are now seeing, if you are even seeing a shift? And is there enough support out there for Black instructors and Black artists in Dallas ISD to make your work as effective as possible for your students?
Well, I have to say I've had support from my principals. I think that is what has sustained me. Is there enough support? No. They don't see us as real dancers. A lot of times, they see us as hip hop dancers. There's not enough support financially.
Right.
For instance, a couple of years ago, Dallas Black had a grant, and they contacted Lincoln, and they would come in and teach class from time to time, which was a great thing. But consistent support to bring in good quality, because children get used to you as the teacher. They need to be exposed to other dance teachers so that when they go to a call, they're able to listen and move faster because they're used to hearing, or they're used to the voices, or they're used to the technique skill of a variety of dancers. We're not exposed to that. My children can't afford $100 an hour class like they do up north. They can't afford that.
Right.
They can only get what I can give them.
Yeah.
And I need help financially to be able to call in some good dancers. I mean, that piece that you saw, his name is Tremaine. He was from Dallas Black Encore. I brought him in, but I had to pay out of my pocket.
Wow.
He created parts of the dance. And of course, he didn't really know them as dancers. So once he created parts or whatever and he was finished, I went back in and readjusted the piece to fit the girls. But of course, that came out of my pocket.
Yeah.
Not the school, not the district, mine.
And I imagine that has to have some kind of mental toll on you to have to do things like that, or be expected to do things like that, because the district or the philanthropic community or the performing arts sector outside of the education system is not stepping up in the way it needs to step up. What is that experience like for you? 'Cause I can only imagine 20 years of that compounding on each other.
I think, again, it goes to the fact that they just don't know. The district, they put major money into athletics. That's what they see, because those are the programs that bring in the money. So those are the programs that bring in the publicity, I should say. They don't see the arts. How do I know they don't see the arts? Because the arts doesn't exist in elementary. The arts finally started to exist in the middle school that feeds Lincoln, because for years I would have dancers come in who didn't even know first position.
Wow.
So I was teaching that type of dancing to students who didn't even know arm and feet positions, which are the total basics of dance. They didn't know any of that. And don't put on ballet music, it's over. So when you don't put the music into the arts at the beginning, what do you expect at the end? But it doesn't make me angry. Sometimes it just makes me sad that they don't understand.
So I want to touch on a topic of this, the arts having this transformative power for students, right? Can you talk a little bit about your work and your push to make the district see, to make the community see that what you're teaching is having a real impact on your students and what the impact is? And you've been doing it for 20 years, but if you can just talk a little bit more about that, because it's such an important topic.
Well, I would have to say that I was hidden for 20 years. Rachel's the one that's brought it out. No one ever knew that 98% of my kids graduated from high school and went on to college. They didn't see that a majority of them are now successful African American women who are major producers in the community. Accountants, lawyers, other educators. They don't see that, but Rachel's brought it out. Wow, Iris, I didn't know. They didn't see that my students had the ability to critique themselves. I remember we were at a game. Rachel was her first time meeting me. And we were talking over on the side, and the girls had just finished their performance, and they had the video of themselves. And they were like, Rachel stopped talking, and she was like, are they critiquing themselves? And I was like, yes, that's what we normally do.
Yeah.
Because after every performance, we come off, we critique ourselves, because remember I said we didn't have mirrors, right? So they would see themselves and say, whoa, my leg wasn't up as high as it should be. So the next performance, the leg would be up the way it should be. But, they would hear me speak, but they didn't know until they actually critiqued. So after every performance, they would critique themselves. So she was like, I cannot believe that. I was like, we've been doing this.
But I love how you've been able to be creative with them to say, we may not have mirrors, but we can get around that by doing this. Not saying you should not have to do that, because you should have the resources.
Right.
But the fact that you've been able to creatively work around those deficits, it's been incredible. There's two kind of questions here I want to ask you as we wrap up. And the first one being, I'm inspired by the hope you continue to have over the 20 years that you've been with the district, and hopefully the many, many more years that you continue with the district. What do you hope for in the years to come, specifically for Lincoln and your program?
Equity. That's what I hope for. And that's what we're going to get. One way or another, someone is going to see those little African-American little girls who strive to be the best that they could possibly be and say they deserve more.
Thank you. I'm trying to tear up at that because I can only help but think that hearing you say that and being in front of you, they have a wonderful role model to begin with
Thank you.
in you. So thank you for being that for them. And the last question I have for you is, what advice do you have, if any, for other Black educators out there who are facing the same things that you're facing, have faced them, or are about to enter into this field in which they are going to face them? What advice do you have for them?
Be brave, be strong, and be diligent. Set your goals, and you'll get them.
Iris, thank you so much, not only for sharing your time here with us today, but for also your leadership that you have demonstrated in your career with the district, and that you continue to demonstrate not only outside of your classroom, but inside of your classroom. I can only imagine the impact that you've had on your students. So thank you so much for what you're doing for the youth in Dallas ISD, and for sharing your story with us here today. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.